Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It is June 30th of 2022. It is a Thursday at about 3 p.m., and there is so much that is happening this week. But perhaps it can be summed up in a very simple statement. When the government says they are here to protect you, when the government is alleging that they want to micromanage your life from cradle to grave, are they actually trying to protect you, or are they trying to protect their power? It's a very interesting question, and we're going to try and address that for you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say about it. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the internet that the social media overlords will allow to hear your voice in tweets, in chats, in phone calls from across the world to tell us exactly what you think about the issues that are affecting us all. And we hope that this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. that you join us, no matter what your government may think, no matter what the internet overlords think, to share your voice. Under the Democratic leadership, the progressive ideology, is the government trying to protect you, or are they trying to protect their power? It's a very interesting question that almost no one in the major media would dare ask. They have a vested interest. So let's look at this. We know that there was a leak of the Roe v. Wade overturned decision by the Supreme Court, and the far left decided to go out, violating the law, to protest in front of the homes of the Supreme Court justices. Again, this is a violation of federal law, but nothing was done to stop them. And so they tried to intimidate our Supreme Court justices to try and endanger their lives, as we will cover in a moment. And when this was seen by Congress, there was a vote to try and enhance the security of our Supreme Court justice and our judicial system. But the far left, like members Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of the Democratic Socialists of America, they laughed. They laughed in the face of this and decided, no, that wasn't important. She actually voted against this because she thought it was important to make the point that the Supreme Court should be leveraged, should be intimidated, should be politicized to agree with her point of view. And you may say, well, how does that make things better for the United States? That any group of people can just go in front of the Supreme Court justice's home, endanger and threaten the lives of those members and their family, and that's supposed to make them do what? Back down to the mob? Is that actually what the Supreme Court is supposed to do? It's a troubling question. But we know that in this case, with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it did not work. The Supreme Court did, in fact, go forward and overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, that, of course, has caused a lot of trauma for the members of the far left. And the news media is pushing that message out that this was horrible, that the lives of American citizens have been irrevocably changed, which doesn't seem to be accurate. In fact, many would say this is just going back to the original intent of the United States. This is something that Ruth Bader Ginsburg stated herself, that the Fourth Amendment doesn't guarantee abortions, and this is a state issue, not a federal issue. But whether you agree with that or not, there were other things that happened at the same time. There was, of course, the decision in the New York State gun control ruling, where New York State lost, where the Supreme Court affirmed that the Second Amendment is a right every American citizen has, that you have the right to defend yourself. Now, this is very important because we've seen in 2020, in 2021, including 2022, that when the left is challenged, when their ideology is even questioned, the first and every time reaction is that they go out and riot. that they commit acts of violence. Fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned, and this weekend, bands of Antifa beat up women for saying that they agreed, for daring to have a point of view that was not the approved point of view, as we have shown you in our live stream on Sunday. When the Supreme Court made this decision, we see, and going to the decision itself, on page 92, in the dissent that came from now retired Justice Breyer, he made it very clear. This was about his personal feelings. He spent 6 pages of his dissent, the first 6 pages, to give his emotional plea that the government has a right higher than the individuals, more important than American citizens, to be able to control our rights and freedoms. And he says it on page 92. He says, quote, "The primary difference between the Supreme Court's view and Justice Breyer's view is that Justice Breyer believes that the Second Amendment allows states to take account of the serious problems posed by gun violence that I have described, that he described in 6 pages, and saying guns are bad. Guns inherently aren't bad. They're an inanimate object. People may be bad, like criminals, like the criminally insane, deranged and demonic individuals that commit mass shootings and school shootings. They are bad. Guns are just a tool, much like we've seen with the cars that have been used throughout this nation in Mukusha, where it was used to run over individuals in a parade, like it was used in Manhattan to run over 8 individuals, like it was used in Las Vegas to run over an 8-year-old child, like we have seen bombs being made to attack individuals in Islamburg, New York. Guns are a tool. The question is, who is the individual using that tool and how do they use it? But according to Justice Breyer, if there is even a question that some individual may criminally use a tool, then the state has a right above the individual to defend themselves, for the state to come in and say, you are unprotected, that the government will take care of it. Now, mind you, this is at the same time that we hear from state after state after state, 22 cities we have seen this in many states we have seen where Democrats have sought to defund the police because they say that the police are inherently racist, that our government is inherently racist. So the only answer is to have less police available to protect the public. And at the same time, they're saying that you can't protect yourself, whether it be with a bulletproof vest or whether it is with a firearm, something that should trouble many, many women across this nation. But they made it very clear. The Democrats made it very, very clear in the 2 main progressive capitals of the United States, in California on the West Coast and in New York State in the East Coast. In fact, we can go to the comments from Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie on June 23rd, when he states, in talking about the Second Amendment, today's Supreme Court decision is a devastating blow to Americans across the country who are tired of living in constant fear of gun violence. Mind you, Carl Hastie is a progressive. New York State is a progressive blue state. New York State has defunded the police in many of its cities, and crime has increased as a result of that. New York State also restricts guns, the Second Amendment. In fact, that was a factor deep in the mind of the Buffalo mass shooter. One of his 3 main concerns was whether or not an American citizen would be able to defend themselves on his demonic onslaught and stop him before he could go forward. And he was relieved to know that in New York State, the restrictions against the public would enable him to commit an act of violence. And yet, we hear from Carl Hastie that the opposite should be true, that American citizens should not be able to stop mass shooters. They should be thankful for the state to leave them defenseless. Now it's a national issue when we see that Joe Biden and many members of Congress succumb to this emotional plea, this emotional statement that says that, well, we not only need to disarm American citizens, we need to remove their rights. Flying in the face of the decision by the Supreme Court, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, as we discussed in our Sunday live stream, says in part that it will encourage states to create red flag laws. And this is important. They're going to financially support these states. They are giving them an incentive. They are buying states to create red flag laws. And in each state, whether it is new or whether the red flag laws already exist, they will pay those states for the people that are put onto that list. They are buying people's rights with your tax dollars. In fact, they're spending $1.4 trillion just on that part of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Does that sound like that's about justice? Or does that sound like it's about denying people their rights? Well, what is it that the left is saying? The left is very confused about this. You see, the left has been very adamant that gun control and its creation was racist. It was created in California to deny the Black Panthers their constitutional right to have guns. But now, when the left says you shouldn't have those guns, well, now they're taking the opposite position, again, for the same reason. It's racist. And they're saying that, well, it's racist to not have gun control, that the government must protect those communities, which is an odd statement. They say, suddenly it seems as if America was on the brink. And with the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade on Friday, emboldening a militant array of white Christian nationalists. Wow, look at them targeting stuff. This is something you couldn't say on Twitter. This is targeting a group of people based on their religious beliefs. That's supposed to be forbidden. Targeting people based on the color of their skin and ascribing to those individuals randomly and arbitrarily racist and sexist ideology, in fact, calling them white supremacists with no proof. In fact, they say, I had visions of mobs dragging people through the streets, and something just kind of switched. We can't rely on anybody else to come save us. It has to be us. This is an individual who's saying, well, I need to defend myself. But remember, Democrats want more gun control. Even if a black man is saying he can't rely on the government because Democrats have told him he can't rely on the police, he can't rely on the government. And when he tries to protect himself, the answer from the Democrats are, quote, California Democrats are scrambling to craft and enact new legislation this week that would somehow salvage the requirement, assuming local law enforcement continues to enforce it, that residents get a permit before carrying a concealed weapon. Current law forces gun owners to show, quote, good cause, end quote, for needing such a permit, and that is now unconstitutional. Quote, our state will continue to lead the fight to keep people safe, end quote. This is from Governor Gavin Newsom of California. So the government's telling you that they're going to keep you safe. The government's also telling you that you can't have police because that's not safe. And that they're going to create a law that suddenly criminals are going to follow. There are over 22,000 gun control laws that have been enacted over the last 5 decades in America. Criminals have never followed any of them. The deranged, demonic individuals that do mass shootings have never followed any of them. Well, let's think about this. Because New York State, like California, is a capital of progressivism. And appointed Governor Gov Hochul had to do something. She could not allow American citizens to exercise their rights, their freedoms. She had to assert that the New York State government, the bluer than blue progressive government of New York State, had to have an iron grip over the lives of its citizens. And so she decided on her own, as we can see in the article in response to the Supreme Court, New York gun ban poised to cover subways, daycare facilities, and others. This is from June 29th, yesterday. Appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, fresh off her Democratic primary victory, assuring that she will continue to be able to control New York State in a progressive vice grip, said Wednesday that she and legislative leaders have agreed on broad strokes of a series of gun control measures that are expected to be voted on Thursday when the state lawmakers return to the Capitol for an extraordinary session. Now, something that's very important here. Kathy Hochul demanded that the state representatives, the state assembly, the state senators, come back to the Capitol to pass a law that no one else knows exists. No one knows what this is. There is literally zero documentation on what they are going to do. Nobody knows. This is a decision that has happened virtually overnight. And looking at New York State's Assembly, looking at this is a live stream right now, there's nothing. We have yet to hear a single debate. We have yet to see what the terms are. We are getting an overnight rule that is ensured to restrict the freedoms and rights of American citizens and ensure that New York State, that the government has more rights and more precedent than American citizens. Appointed Governor Kathy Hochul says that she wants to put in place bans in certain sensitive places. What are those sensitive places? Who gets to decide what is sensitive and what is not? She wants to prevent guns from being carried in private businesses unless business owners explicitly allow them. That's something we're going to get into in just a second. Expand the list of criteria that disqualifies someone from obtaining a pistol permit. They want to find new ways to stop you from being able to exercise your rights. And expand on the state's safe storage law, requiring guns to be locked while in a car in a home with someone under the age of 18. Well, here's an interesting question. How would they know if you are or are not storing your firearm safely unless New York State had to have the right above the individual to go into your home and to see how you are storing those firearms? That would violate your Fourth Amendment, your right to privacy. That you no longer have a right to privacy because the state has a right to see what you're doing with your firearms if they've given you the right and allowed you to exercise your Second Amendment right. That is troubling. Well, this sounds like a series of steps to impede you from being able to exercise your Second Amendment right, to deny your ability to exercise the very rights that you have. In fact, Kathy Hochul went on to say, and we are quoting from The Gothamist, this is from June 24th, when she first decided that she had to take action, that she had to stop what the Supreme Court has allowed. And she said her team is considering a system where guns will be prohibited in businesses unless they proactively allow them in their establishment. Think about that for a moment. Quote, there could be a presumption that businesses, unless they were to put a sign welcoming someone with a concealed carry weapon, would be automatically excluded. This is Kathy Hochul's word. She goes on to say, and I quote, so we're looking at a number of ways. Our judgment now is that those would be sound, but we're just going to verify that, end quote. And if they don't tell you that you can exercise your right, then you are denied that right. Think about that. So you have a right to the freedom of religion. So every church in America, every synagogue, every mosque would have to put a sign out in front of their establishments and say, you have the right to exercise your freedom of religion. And if they did not, you could not exercise your faith. That is the same thing that she has just said. That is the same example of what she is saying. You don't have the right unless someone tells you you can use that right. The exact opposite of what the Constitution and what the amendments actually say. And you might ask yourself, well, this is to protect people. This is to protect Americans. Are you sure? This is from WRGB News, CBS in Albany. And we see that the reporter, Ann McCloy, asked, do you have the numbers to show that it's concealed carry permit holders that are committing crimes? Since that is exactly who Gov Hochul is trying to target. She is trying to deny people the ability to conceal carry firearms to protect themselves. That women cannot carry a firearm to protect themselves against those that would aggress against them. Okay, so where is the evidence? Gov Hochul says, I don't have numbers. I don't need to have a data point to say this. I know that she has a responsibility for this state to have sensible gun laws. Now, let's think about that. Matter of fact, I'm going to play this in full so that you can hear it.
Do you have the numbers to show that it's the concealed carry permit holders that are committing crimes? Because the lawful gun owner will say that you're attacking the wrong person. It's really people that are getting these guns illegally that are causing the violence, not the people going and getting the permit legally. And that's the basis for the whole Supreme Court argument. Do you have the numbers?
I don't need to have numbers. I don't have to have a data point to say that this is going to matter. All I know is I have a responsibility to the people of this state to have sensible gun safety laws. And this one was not devised by the Hochul administration. It comes out of an administration from 1908. I don't need a data point to make the case that I have a responsibility to protect the people of this state.
Somebody who's going to go do a mass shooting or something like that may not go get a concealed carry permit.
I never said there's any correlation between our solution here and the Buffalo case. In fact, I signed a package of 10 laws following Buffalo that dealt with the issues that were raised there.
Hochul's gun laws, passed after the Tops grocery store shooting in Buffalo, raised the age at which a New Yorker can purchase a firearm to 21. But now there are questions about whether restricting public spaces under the new bills infringe on Second Amendment rights.
What if they can't practice self-defense because of the restrictions?
My point, let me give you like statistics. You like numbers? I said at the outset, 5 people per 100,000 have died from gun violence in the state of New York. The states that have more liberal laws, so carry guns everywhere you want, on the theory of self-protection, their average is about 28.6%. More people are dying in those states.
So Gov Hochul's entire statement is that she doesn't need proof. She doesn't need to justify why she is going to use the full power of the New York state government against the American citizen, to deny them their constitutional right, a right above not only New York State, a right not only above the federal government, it is a right that is absolute by birth. And she's doing it because she knows, because you should trust her, because she's just doing it for you. Mind you, she wants to say that, well, New York State's safer than everywhere else because of this, which isn't necessarily true. Have you looked at the crime rates in Rochester, in Syracuse, in New York City? Has anyone besides this channel every year for the last 15 years, have you looked at the New York gun-involved violence elimination report? That not one gun control law that has ever been instituted by New York State has ever stopped gun violence, because the criminal and the deranged don't care about laws. Maybe she knows the fact that that is not true, that concealed carry permit holders, as is the case across the rest of the nation, are more law-abiding than any other group of individuals in the United States. And they pose less of a threat to law enforcement and to their fellow citizens than any other individual, which would defeat her reasoning for why she has to now impede the Second Amendment. A handful of states, including California, are considering similar steps to revise gun control measures after the Supreme Court ruling. This is coming from NBC, Channel 4 in New York. New York is the first state to try and pass a law, and we are sure it will pass, to conceal carry weapons only in businesses that explicitly allow it, if the state gives you permission first. So in other words, you don't have a right. So who is this really helping? And again, New York State has no data. They won't tell you what they're going to do. They're going to do this. They're going to introduce the bill and pass it, but you're not going to be able to see it. They have no evidence. They just say, it'll be good for you. Just like they said, it's good non-citizens would be able to vote in elections, something that is absolutely unconstitutional. In fact, a New York Supreme Court judge struck down the New York City rule that would allow 800,000, perhaps 1 million non-citizens to vote in elections. It's something that didn't get a lot of attention. But we can see, quote, by providing city residents with a voice in their local government representation, we provide them with an equal stake in long-term success of our city. This is Councilwoman Speaker Adrienne Adams and Shauna Haniff, chair of the council's Immigration Committee, in a joint statement. They go on to say, quote, now more than ever, when our rights are being threatened, we need more civic and community engagement, not less. Well, think about this. Who's threatening the rights of American citizens? New York State. And we are seeing members of the government of New York State trying to say, well, we have to protect you from New York State by denying you your freedom. We're going to nullify your vote. This is coming from Reuters. New York judge rules law allowing non-citizens to vote for mayor is unconstitutional. And Democrats, progressives, are saying, well, the only way to protect your rights is to deny them and to make sure that the government has more power than you. This is about power. This is the executive director of the New York Immigrant Coalition. The state constitution is a floor, not a ceiling, of who can be enfranchised. We're going to keep fighting so that nearly 1 million New Yorkers who are building their lives here and investing in our communities can have a say in their local democracy. Except it's not their local democracy. Even by, not just by New York State's decision of what is a citizen and who can vote, but because of the United States Constitution that defines who can vote in our elections, which is an American citizen by definition. But it is the opinion of progressives, well, anyone can vote. But because they're in New York City and progressives know that this is something that will help them maintain power, they're now trying to give them rights, which in fact denies your rights. In New York State, there are about 2.5 million people that vote in every single election. Adding 1 million new votes would dilute and diminish those votes. That means that your vote is nullified. 1 in 3 voters may not have their vote count anymore because non-citizens would vote. That's what New York State wanted. But why would Democrats want there to be a question about election integrity? Perhaps because they gain something for this. Taking it as an example, and this comes from this page 5. This is the decision on the judicial order in New York City non-citizen municipal voting case. We are showing you in the description, you will be able to find the link so that you can read the actual court ruling that many people are quoting, but no one will actually show you. And this is a ruling from Justice Hochul, and on page 5 of his ruling, under the analysis, quote, it is established in New York State's Constitution that no member of the state shall be disenfranchised or deprived of any rights or privileges secured to any citizen. Now, that's a very important statement he makes there, and he goes on to say, this court finds that the registration of new voters will certainly affect voters, political parties, candidates' campaigns, re-elections, and the makeup of their constituency, and is not a speculation. The weight of citizens' votes will be diluted by municipal votes, and candidates and political parties alike will need to reconfigure their campaigns. Though the plaintiffs, the public, have not suffered any harm today, the harm they will suffer is imminent, and it is reasonably certain that they will suffer their claimed harm if proposed municipal voters are entitled to vote. In other words, non-citizens. It doesn't get more clear than that. So we have two different cases here, maybe three, that I want to put together. The Supreme Court has come out and said, okay, Roe versus Wade was overturned. The response from the progressive left was to try to assassinate a member of the Supreme Court. They committed riots and violence across this nation, attacking women, and those women might have been able to defend themselves if it weren't for the fact that those same progressive states say you don't have a right to defend yourself and rely on the government. Except the government wasn't there to protect women from mobs of Antifa members beating on them, as those states and those cities are defunding the police while promising that criminals will finally start following the law because the state said so. And you don't have a right to protect yourself, to defend yourself from this obvious and continuous threat that the state is making more active, not less. And the state, and we're seeing that the progressive movement is looking at this and saying, and by the way, if you disagree with this, if you would challenge this, we're going to introduce a new group of voters to be able to take away your voice, to dilute the elections such that you will no longer be able to stop this government from taking more and more power and giving and allowing you to exercise less and less of your power. Doesn't that sound dangerous? That you are only allowed to exercise your rights where the state has decided you have a right to do so. That you must comply, and if you try to complain, well, you will be silenced. Who are the progressives really protecting here? Because it doesn't seem to be the public. They don't want women to be able to defend themselves. They don't want women to make decisions for themselves. They don't want anyone in America, black or otherwise, to be able to protect their homes and their properties and their lives. They don't want police to be available to help protect these individuals. And they want to make sure that the votes are always going to be on their side in their progressive capitals and the rest of the nation. They want to ensure that even when the public, as it is now, is angry with the Democrats and their policies that have created inflation, that have created a food shortage, that have created an energy crisis, that even when they do that, that they will not suffer the consequences because a new group of individuals who receive benefits from these very same programs will vote in their favor and offset anyone who is upset. Is the evidence pointing anywhere else? In looking at the decisions on Roe v. Wade and the consequences coming from the progressive left, in looking at the decision on gun control in New York and across the nation, and looking at the consequences, the reactions by the progressive left, and looking at voting in New York State as a response and seeing the reaction from the progressive left, how can you see that government is making life better for the average citizen? Perhaps you may say, well, no, we're missing some context. We misunderstand the evidence that is available. Maybe it's perfectly fine for New York State to introduce and vote on a bill they have never told anyone about that has rules that controvert the freedoms that are guaranteed by the Constitution, and to do that all in a day without anyone knowing anything about it in a in a government that is controlled by a single political party, maybe you think that's a great idea. Tell us why. How will this protect American citizens' lives? How will this result in more freedom, or even maintaining the amount of freedom that we have at this time? And how is this an example for the rest of the world to look at and say, this is how you attain freedom? This is how you can emulate the United States and be more free than you are today. We dispute that. And we look forward to hearing what you think about it. Not only today in the comments, but also every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we do our live stream with you to hear what you have to say from anywhere in the world. We want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.